When you want to get the contents of a text file placed on the artboard, there's a simpler way rather than going into Finder or Windows Explorer, opening the file, selecting, copying, going back here and pasting. You can simply take the text file and place it. So right now I have a plain old artboard, doesn't matter which color mode you're using. And let's go up here to the File menu and about halfway down choose Place. And in the Chapter 8 folder of the project files, there's this file called Alice. Double click it. This is the first few paragraphs of Alice in Wonderland. And it's giving us some choices. I'm going to stick with the defaults here. It already has paragraph returns. I don't want to remove them, so I'll leave these blank. There's no tabs to worry about, so it doesn't matter one way or the other how that is. And just click OK. And when you do that, you get what's called the loaded text cursor. If you've ever used Adobe InDesign or PageMaker, you're kind of familiar. This simply means, hey, here's the text that's attached. Now, there's two things you could do. You could click and drag to define the space that you want to put the text in. What I'm going to do instead, I'm just going to go up here to the top and I'm going to click. And when I click, it's going to find its own width and height. And I can make this shorter or taller, narrower, wider, just like any old object. You notice up here in the upper left corner we have just below the top sizing handle we have this other white box. That's called the in port. That means that if this is the continuation of text in another box, I'd see a little symbol there. Because this is blank, it means this is the start of the text. And down here in the lower right corner, we have this kind of red plus sign in a box. That's the overflow symbol. It's also called the out port, because if you want to take this text and continue it somewhere else, you can click here, click on that red plus, and then click somewhere else or drag somewhere else and continue that. We did that in the previous lesson, so I'm not going to go through that here. Also, this kind of little antenna sticking out here. Let's see what's going on with that. That's something new to the Creative Cloud version. I'm going to zoom in. However you want to zoom in is fine. And let's say we decide that we want this text just kind of going into maybe a narrower space, maybe more like a newspaper column. If you put your mouse pointer on this regular sizing handle, or you could use the sizing handles in the corners, doesn't matter, you could just drag and the text reflows, just like it's regular old text in any text editing program. Or if you want to make it wider, of course, you can drag it out and the text reflows. When you're doing that, all that's happening is that the text is reflowing. The size of the text is staying the same. But what's new in the Creative Cloud version is you could convert this area text into point text. Point text just like regular, like a line of headline text. That's something that we looked at in the previous lesson. There's two ways of converting this into point text. One way, the obvious way, is if you put your mouse pointer on here and you see you get this little symbol, you might get a little pop-up help saying double click to convert this to point text, and you could do that. You could also go up to the type menu and choose convert to point type. I'll do it this way just because we're looking at it first. I'll double click and it's going to give me a warning message saying that there was overset text. That's what that red plus sign in the red box was down on bottom we were looking at. So yes, I'll continue. I don't really care about the overset text. Now when I do that, it doesn't look like anything is different until we decide that, oh, okay, after all, I decide I want this text to fit in a narrower column. And if I shrink it like this, notice the text is not reflowing. We're simply squishing it. Or going in the opposite direction. If we drag it back, we're expanding it. Now that doesn't mean it's wrong. Sometimes you really do want to convert area text into point text and vice versa. Of course, you could always come back here and double click. And now it's changed. It's the same thing. You could also go back to the type menu and convert one way or the other. Just going to scroll up to the top here. And right now I have my regular old selection text. I want to get my text cursor in here. So I'll just double click. So that's just a little mouse shortcut. Rather than clicking on the text tool and clicking in here, when you have the regular selection tool, double clicking will put your text in there. Right now this is just one big mass of text. Very hard to read because there's no blank spaces between the paragraphs, or we don't have a first line indent with each paragraph. That's formatting that we can do. Now we want to use the paragraph panel. We can click the little paragraph link up here, but that's going to be a temporary thing. Right? We click it, we use it, and the thing goes away. I want the panel setting up here. So I'm going to go up to the window menu, down here to type, and from the flyout, I'm going to choose paragraph. And now we have paragraph. You see it's in the same group as character. Let's just drag this over here. So what I'm going to do, first thing is, I'm going to select all the text in this box. So I'm going to press Command A, or Control A in Windows, because the word all begins with the letter A. Down over here, see if you roll your mouse pointer over this box, it says space after paragraph. Now you can type in a size, or you can hit this up arrow to increase it. And when you do that, I'll just click to deselect. So now we can see where one paragraph ends and the next one begins. What if we decide that we want a first line indent instead? Once again, I'll press Command A or Control A in Windows to select it all, and I'll set this back to 0. I'll just drag over it and type in a 0. And then over here, this one is first line indent. Sometimes the little tooltip doesn't show up, but if you click this, you notice this sets an indent for the first line of each paragraph. You could also change the line spacing, also known as leading. We go over here to the character panel. So now we can see here I have this as 12-point text on 14.4 points leading. Okay, where did that number come from? Well, you see this number is in parentheses. That means it's automatic. It's 20% bigger than the point size. That's just kind of a rule of thumb. And the reason that is if you have a situation like over here, you see we have a descender for the letter P, and then we have the ascenders for these T's. They're not brushing up against each other, so there's a little bit of extra space. But sometimes you want to open that up a little bit. So again, I'll press Command A or Control A in Windows to select all, and rather than accepting this, I'll just type in a number. Now I can click here and choose a number, or I can type one. Maybe I decide I want this to be 18 points. I'll just make that 18 and hit the Tab key. And now I've got this 18 points leading. So it's opened up, it's maybe a little easier to read. Two other things I want to show you, and those are kerning, which is this little thing here, and tracking, which is this over here. Kerning and tracking both deal with the spaces between letters, but there's a little bit of a difference. Tracking deals with an overall text box, and kerning is for specific letter pairs, the space between specific letter pairs. You'd use tracking, let's say if you have a lot of text and you need to shorten up the space that it's in, or maybe expand it a little bit. So here's something that tracking is going to do. I'm going to scroll down, and maybe let's take a look at this paragraph here. Maybe I need to add some text. I'll move this out of the way, and I'm afraid that there's not enough room here. I'm going to select this paragraph. Now, if you double-click a word, you select a word. If you triple-click, you select a whole line.
Now, remember earlier we converted this from area type to point type. If we had not done that, if we had left this as area type, triple-clicking the word would select the entire paragraph. So we don't really have the option right now of triple-clicking to select the paragraph, because it's point type, not area type, but that's okay. We can simply take the mouse and drag to select the paragraph.
Now we have this selected, and over here I can see the tracking is 0. If I shrink this, you see what's happening is it's taking up less space, but it's also getting more smushed. By the way, there is a keyboard shortcut for this. If you hold down the Option key or the Alt key in Windows, and then tap the left arrow key on the keyboard, you see you shrink it. You shrink the tracking. You can see that's gone to -30. And we can open it up the same way. Hold down the Option key or the Alt key in Windows and tap the right arrow key on the keyboard, and that opens it up. Now, sometimes if you have text that has kind of weird hard returns, you might need to fix that. But that's really what tracking is all about. So let's take a look at kerning. I'm going to go up to the top here. I'll get the regular selection tool. Let's shrink this, and we want to put in the title. So I'll get the type tool, I'll click over here, and I'll just type. I'm going to turn on my caps lock, and I'm going to type Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. And I want to make this bigger, so I'm going to select all. I'll press Command A or Control A in Windows, and I'll make this bigger. Whichever way you want to do it is fine. Maybe 36 is a little too big. Okay. And let's get a font here. Maybe I'll choose Cooper Black. Okay. And let's bring this over here. And I'm going to zoom in here a little bit just so I can see what I'm doing. Come over here. And now we can see closely kind of what's happening between the letter pairs. The A and the D here are squished together, and the V and the E are squished together, but we have a little bit more space here between the D and the V. Maybe we have a little too much space between the apostrophe and the S. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to double click, and that puts my cursor in there. And you see we have our kerning over here. And if I hit the down arrow, it brings it in just very slightly. Or if I want it moved over again, I can tap that up arrow. The keyboard shortcut for kerning is exactly the same as the keyboard shortcut for tracking because they're very similar. So I'm going to hold down the Option key or the Alt key in Windows, and with the key held down, I'm going to tap the left arrow key, and that moves in. Or I could hold down the Option key or the Alt key in Windows and tap the right arrow key. You can put in more space, or you can really squish things up if you want. So if you have text that you really need to pay very close attention to, you can go into the space between each letter pair and do the kerning and do the tracking so you have the exact amount of space that you want.
Kerning is something you do when you have display type like you see here, because the letters are big enough that you can tell what the spaces are between them. But you don't want to do kerning for body text like you see, because the letters are too small and nobody's going to notice what the spaces are between the letters.